There is something slightly strange about the way we build businesses today, right? We spend months understanding our product, we study the competition, we analyze the market, we even obsess over pricing. I'm sure you must have built presentations after presentations explaining why we are different as well. And then, almost as an afterthought, we actually ask, so, what does the buyer actually think? And that, my friends, is the question that is far more uncomfortable than it sounds. Your buyer doesn't experience your business through your product roadmap, your organizational chart, your beautifully crafted positioning document, or the 4748 features that you and your product team is incredibly proud of. They experience it through a much messier combination of perception, trust, risk, emotions, memory, context, influence, and last but not the least, human judgment. I think that's where the unfair advantage lies. It's not about knowing more about your product, but it's about understanding something your competitor may have overlooked. Yes, you've guessed it right. It's the person trying to decide whether your product deserves a place in their world. Welcome everybody to yet another episode of Mindful Minutes. This is your host, Tanay Sarpotdar, and today we are going to explore something that sits beautifully at the intersection of behavioral science, marketing, sales, and even strategy. The topic for today is the unfair advantage of understanding your buyer. I couldn't think of someone better to have this conversation with than my guest today, who has been a mentor, a marketing leader, a B2B strategist, a behavioral insights practitioner, founder of B2B Growth Essentials. She adorns a lot of hats. She brings together strategic marketing experience with behavioral economics and B2B influence strategy. Her work focuses very deliberately on making those insights useful in the real world, not just intellectually interesting. She also works as a fractional CMO, which makes today's conversation particularly interesting because she sees both sides of the equation: the strategic decisions businesses make and the human behavior sitting underneath those decisions. Welcome, Suhasini Kirloskar. Welcome to Mindful Minutes.
Thank you, Tanay.
Let's start with a confession. I've spent enough time around B2B marketing to know that most companies can tell you in extraordinary detail what they sell. But I'm not convinced that they can tell you with the same confidence why their buyers buy. So let's start from here. Why is it that companies can know their products, markets, and competitors so intimately and still fundamentally misunderstand the person buying from them?
Yeah, I think that all of us assume things about how other people think, analyze, and decide. For example, you may assume that if you want to convince someone, present them with facts. But in reality, we are seeing more and more situations in which facts don't convince people. And, that's a longer conversation and we can discuss many examples. We'll not go there right now. But because of this, there has been a lot of research, specifically in the last 15, 20 to 25 years in behavioral science and behavioral economics. And this research throws up some surprising insights about what really persuades people and how they take decisions. So let me give you an example. I may believe that I have a very strong offer for you. I want to sell my product or solution. Tanay, I will give you everything that you are getting from the product that you're currently buying, but at a 25% lower price. So I believe that this is rationally a very good offer for you. But what's happening is that there is a very strong bias in our minds, in all of our minds, and one that we are not even aware of. You are not aware of this, but possibly in your mind, more expensive equates to better quality. So you think of my offer not as a good option, but rather as a compromise in quality. And we are talking on two different planes. So until sellers and marketers study and understand such cognitive biases and decision shortcuts, we are going to keep struggling.
Absolutely, absolutely. I even find this fascinating because perhaps the biggest problem isn't that companies don't have customer data. It's not that they don't have customer data. It's that they often have information about the customer without understanding the human behind the information. Uh, I've got certain examples wherein people tell me they have CRMs that can tell what someone did, but I think it doesn't necessarily tell us what they did or what they were trying to avoid, what they were afraid of, what they needed to believe, or perhaps what finally made the decision feel safe. Right? Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. Why they did what they did.
correct, correct. Um, so I think the conversation becomes more interesting from here on because once we accept that the buyer isn't simply evaluating features and price, something else changes. Our strategy and that has to change too. And let's push our discussion in that line. If I genuinely understand how my buyer thinks, what should change inside my marketing strategy? And I don't mean let's personalize emails a little better that type, but what fundamentally changes?
So, firstly, behavioral science is a social science. So, it is different from, say, mathematics or chemistry, in which, A plus B is always equal to C. We can't totally understand any one individual, but behavioral science can give us a lot of guidance and pointers, which can help us to make changes. And these changes enhance the responses that we get to our messaging, and we are able to persuade people to take action. So I'll start by saying that we need to understand certain underlying principles. Next, we need to experiment and start seeing the shifts in behavior. There may not be any simple answers. Sometimes a very simple change can give you a tremendous impact. Sometimes we may still try to struggle, but we have to experiment, measure, fine tune, and find the answers. But once we understand the extremely powerful underlying principles, we need to incorporate them at every stage of the marketing and sales cycle. Actually, no one will kind of have to tell us that we need to incorporate them, because once we have those insights, we are sure to do it because we will realize how powerful this knowledge is. So we need to embed this knowledge at every point, right from branding to demand generation to content marketing to sales pitches to negotiations and even retaining customers. And doing this will significantly enhance the outcomes of lead generation, brand building, and deal closure.
Awesome, awesome, exactly. Uh, I even suspect this is where behavioral insight either becomes a strategic asset or becomes another interesting workshop people attend and then forget. So, I mean, if
Very true.
understanding the buyer doesn't change our positioning, our message, our content, our sales processes, our pricing, or even the market we choose to pursue, then perhaps we haven't really understood the buyer in itself. So uh,
Very
we've probably have just simply collected more information around them.
true.
uh, Moving to the next part, there's a distinction I think which is emerging uh, here. Uh, Customer knowledge tells you what to say, but behavioral understanding may tell you why that message has a chance of being believed. And that distinction becomes even more important when we move from marketing into sales. I think that's where our beautifully constructed strategies eventually meet one very inconvenient thing, which is another human being. So my question is, let's take a real B2B pipeline where we have leads coming in, meetings are happening, proposals are being sent, and yet deals stall, prospect disappear, or decisions keep getting pushed. How how would you use behavioral thinking to diagnose what is actually happening here?
Yes, I'm sure anyone who has done B2B selling has faced a situation where you offer a product or service or solution with excellent features that actually solve your buyer's problems, and you're even offering the right price. Yet the buyer does not take action. You may come to know that the contract has not even gone to a competitor, rather, your prospect has done absolutely nothing. That's because people are comfortable with letting things remain as they are. And we all have a very strong bias, which is called the status quo bias. We fear risk. That is one
Right.
more behavioral principle. We are comfortable letting things remain as they are, and we fear risk. So, as a seller, as a marketer, we are offering a new product, excellent features, correct pricing. But the prospect is actually thinking, if something goes wrong with this, my reputation is on the line, or even my job is on the line. Again, you're actually talking on two different planes. But if you had the ability to identify these psychological biases at work, then you would know how to use psychology to overcome them. But actually, again, in B2B marketing, most of us, we are just focused on our own products. And so we fail to recognize these aspects. So that's the reason why, wonderful deals stall. And I think that if you ask me, the biggest revenue leakage, probably for my business and many businesses, has been the status quo bias. So, of course, now that I'm studying this, I know that that needs to be overcome with other psychological approaches. It's not going to be overcome just by presenting more facts.
Absolutely. I think this is where behavioral science becomes practically powerful, even for a fractional CMO, right? Because that's what companies would love to hear. They would love to hear the no side of it. They would love to hear the thinking behind it, and they would love to see how much they are being pushed to make the right decision. Because a dashboard might tell you conversions are down, but it doesn't tell you whether the buyer is unconvinced, uncomfortable, overwhelmed, uh, politically exposed, afraid of making the wrong decision, or simply not ready.
Absolutely, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Um, the metric even tells where the body stopped moving, but behavioral insight can help us ask why, which is what I love about this discussion. Because uh, I've had situations where uh, can no decision actually be a decision was a question that was asked. And I was like, yes, that is also a decision. Uh, we cannot just be reading everything and saying yes to everything. There can be times where it is a no. A no decision is also a decision. So on our point of this topic where we said unfair advantage, perhaps where the word unfair in today's title starts making sense is if two companies have broadly similar products, similar technology, and similar access to market, but one understands the psychological landscape of its buyer better, that company probably is playing with information the other company doesn't have, or not necessarily they have more information, but probably have a better interpretation of it. And I think that feels like a genuine competitive advantage because it adds a layer to it, an interest layer probably.
That's true. And, I do find that, in the B2C space, in the D2C space, there is a lot more application. There's a lot more, they're leveraging behavioral principles a lot more. For
Correct.
example, when I speak to B2B business founders, say about a new website, then behavioral aspects or persuasion are absolutely not on their radar. Mostly it's about my product is great, show my product, show my product, show my product. So,
Correct.
yeah, you're absolutely right. It is going to be an unfair advantage. While the world is moving in the direction of AI, and I think AI is great, very powerful.
Correct.
But as long as there are still people who are taking purchase decisions, we have
Yes.
to also, parallelly improve our understanding of psychology.
No, absolutely. I can give one example. When I was at IIM, we were discussing the difference between AI and the traditional way of marketing that we've been doing. Traditional as in digital only, but the traditional way without AI. And one thing that the professor specifically mentioned is, so long as you'll have a human taking the decision, you need a human to prepare it. So we have people for now making the decisions and taking the decisions. So we need people's understanding to do something useful, and with that understanding, go from insight to action probably better.
Yes.
Great. On that note of insight to action, how do you make buyer understanding operational? So, for example, if you were walking into a B2B company tomorrow, or you must have already experienced it and discovered that everyone had strong opinions about the customer, but very little actual understanding of buyer behavior. Where would you start, and what would you want the organization to change first?
Yes, this is a big challenge, because our team has been studying the seminal work of about, I think, maybe 5 world-renowned researchers. Two of them have won a Nobel Prize. They've written
Wow.
books which have sold millions and millions of copies. And, you would have come across some of those extremely popular books as well. And then we kind of defined out of all this, what are those, it came to the number 11, those 11 principles which have the most powerful application specifically on B2B sales and marketing. But we can't expect everyone to, wade through those multiple books and research reports to find this learning, videos as well. So we actually created that list of those 11 principles, and we mapped them to specific points in the sales and marketing cycle, like which is a principle that can really, make an impact in your content and social media, or which is a principle that you should incorporate when it comes to your sales pitch or in terms of trying to win back lost customers. So that's the work that we've done. So we've tried to put a structure to applying behavioral insights, or you can call it behavioral economics, to B2B sales and marketing. That's exactly the work we've done.
Amazing. And this one line I would add for the listeners here. This is where I think I wanted your perspective in this podcast, because I believe you are one of those strategic marketers who can separate themselves from people who simply produce marketing, or leaders who simply go on, you don't ask which campaign should we run, because I've experienced this firsthand, and I've heard this from people as well, that you don't ask what campaign should we run directly. You start by saying what have we misunderstood, and probably sometimes that's the highest value marketing decision, that something can help to create something new rather, or it may remove the assumption that has been quietly steering the business in the wrong direction. So wonderful, I like this.
Thank you.
Let's take a deeper turn. I would love to hear, because not just me, even the listeners would love to hear about B2B growth essentials, and also the amazing thing that is coming up later this month. But before we go over there is something that I've been thinking about while preparing for this. So we've been talking about customer centricity so often, in fact, that this phrase has now become like a wallpaper. Everybody says it. But I think very few companies actually reorganize their thinking around it. Probably because, or maybe the real test isn't do we listen to our customers here, or maybe the real test is, would our strategy look different if we genuinely understood them? Because if the answer is no, perhaps we were not listening, or we are just listening without learning. So On that note, from understanding towards mastery, I would love to hear from you that you spend a lot of time turning behavioral science into something practical for B2B teams. What I find interesting is there's a big gap between knowing these principles and actually using them when you are pricing, pitching, negotiating, generating demand, or trying to win back a customer. What does it take to cross that gap?
Yes, that's exactly what we want to help with. We want to help B2B sales and marketing professionals, teams, leaders. We want to help enterprise sales folks to incorporate these very powerful insights into strategy as well as into tactics. And, what we've culled out the list of 11 principles, the kind of research, it's not our research, but the research that we've compiled, which shows how powerful these principles are, and then how they can be applied. For example, a website banner, are you really using it to its, in a way that can be powerful psychologically, or are you just saying something about my product is the best or whatever? So at every stage, so we've really tried to bring this knowledge to people in a very structured and in a very usable way. That's the work we're doing now. And while we have been doing this at various forums, conducted knowledge sessions for dozens or maybe hundreds of sales and marketing people and small business founders as well. But yes, next week coming up is the our first full online masterclass series, which is over 3 weeks plus some post-program nudges.
Awesome.
So that's exciting. And with that, we think that like a lot of people can actually start gaining these perspectives. So that's what we have coming up soon. And then we can follow it up with smaller sessions. Like we could do a smaller session, just say for a branding team, or we could do a smaller session, just say for a sales team, which is more focused on like the presentation part, the pitching part, the handshake, the deal closure, So, and we also do another one for the marketing campaigns team, the lead generation team. So that's how we're trying to help organizations to quickly embed this at every stage.
Amazing. For everybody listening, the online masterclass series is on 21st August. It's for 3 Fridays, I believe. And you have two amazing leaders, Suhasini Kirloskar, of course, and Shama Datta. So definitely sign up for that. I think the ultimate test of any strategic insight here would be not just saying, did I learn something interesting, but did I change what I did on Monday morning? I think that's where your work becomes particularly interesting. So take the step towards behavioral thinking out of the box, out of the academic box, and put together situations where B2B decisions, or rather put yourself into the shoes where B2B decisions get actually made, brainstorm, and get practical strategies for yourself. I think amazing discussion to begin with. I think today's episode has come a full circle as of now, but I have a lot of things that I would love to come back to again. I think unfair advantage isn't necessarily something your competitor can't have. It can simply be something that you haven't learned to see yet. And that's where behavior may exactly be. On that, please take philosophy into B2B growth essentials, where behavioral insights are applied to the practical realities of B2B marketing and sales, like Suhasini mentioned, and go from strategy to influence, where buyer actually has to decide whether to act. For everybody who's listening and who spent years getting better at selling their product, but suddenly realizing they may not have much better at, or they may not get much better at understanding the person buying it, definitely sign up and start thinking, what would you tell them to start noticing tomorrow? Thank you very much, Suhasini. It has been amazing talking to you always. Any closing
Thanks
notes.
so much, Tanay. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity and yeah, for the very, very interesting conversation.
Amazing, amazing. For everybody else, I want to end on one thought. We often talk about competitive advantages, something tangible, better technology, lower cost, better distribution, a stronger brand, probably more data. But some advantages are much quieter. Sometimes the advantage is simply being the organization that understands what everybody else has overlooked. And that's perhaps what makes understanding the buyer so powerful. That's the strange irony in business. We spent an extraordinary amount of energy trying to become unforgettable to our customers with better campaigns, content, pitches, brands. And yet the businesses that stay with people are often the ones that did something much simpler. So they made the other person feel understood. That's the real unfair advantage. Not persuading someone harder, not speaking louder, but having the cleverest product in the room. The moment you become curious enough to enter the world or enter this world, you stop just marketing at people, you start understanding them. And sometimes understanding is the most powerful form of influence we have. This has been an amazing session at Mindful Minutes. I'm your host, Tanay Sarpotdar. Today's conversation with Suhasini Kirloskar leaves us with perhaps the simplest and hardest question in business. Before asking someone to buy from you, have you done enough to understand what it feels like to be them? Until the next Mindful Minute, don't just know your customer, know the world from which they are making their decision. Thank you. Bye-bye.